Our world could be different. I was fighting my case probably just as hard as I guess, anybody in there trying to say that they're in there for something they didn't do, but I'm fighting. And one of the things that I noticed early on is that the innocent projects leaned in favor of DNA evidence. So I never knew if there was DNA evidence or not, but I repeatedly filed freedom of information requests just in case there was. I filed them repeatedly. My lawyers, who had my case 7 years pro bono, without them, I wouldn't be here, right? But they literally filed 5 or 6 dozen Freedom of Information acts that were just being ignored, where we were trying to seek different information, right? When they called me and said that they were going to take my case, it was like a Monday. Wednesday, I get information again. They found DNA evidence. And it was that simple because when they went to go get the box, like how they show you on TV, they say when they went and opened the box, it was just sitting there. It was sitting there the whole time.
It was not hidden. It was right.
It was right there. Our world could be different.
Hello, folks. How you doing? My name is Tim Black. I want to welcome you to a special edition of the Tim Black Show. I got an opportunity right here to interview someone. I'm looking forward to sharing this story with you. It's of a young man formerly incarcerated, wrongfully convicted, finally exonerated, lost 26 years of his life due to the system, but he's free now. I want him to share a story with you to put a face, a human with these stories that we hear. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucino Hamilton. How you doing, Lucino?
I'm doing fine. Yourself?
I'm doing fine, man. I want to thank you for your patience from the bottom of my heart, brother, because in no way these problems I've had today, no way are indicative of how I feel about this interview. I'm looking forward to this, and your story must be told. I'm glad you chose this platform. Lucino, I know your story, man. I read the Truth Out article. I read many publishers in the Detroit News. I looked at a couple other interviews, brother. Tell me how the hell this happened. Tell me how, please start there. Tell me what happened and explain to the audience.
In 1994, the end of 1994, the 27th, 28th, my foster mother, 15 years, was murdered in her home. Sometime after that, I was arrested in an unrelated investigation. Police in Detroit had a tactic they used called dragnet arrest. They would come through the neighborhood, arrest everybody standing outside for the purpose of gathering information. They don't really plan on keeping anyone long, scare people, get what they can get, and use that information to go out and do their investigations with. But when I went down to the police station, I ended up getting jumped on by the police, and I woke up charged with my mother's murder. There was no physical evidence. There was nothing to say that I had anything to do with the murder, with the exception of a informant inside the precinct. He came to the preliminary exam a couple weeks later and said that while I was in the precinct, I confessed to him and I was bound over. Sometime later, he died. When it was time for me to go to trial, the prosecutor brought someone in from the prosecutor's office. They sat down in the seat and read the lie he had told. We didn't even have an opportunity, for a jury to even cross-examine that man, because a preliminary exam is basically a probable cause hearing to see if they say they have enough. But I was convicted and sentenced to 52 to 80 years in the state of Michigan. I was 19 when it happened. And yeah, I used to, early on, I had found some memorandums from the police and the prosecutor's office where they were discussing openly that these men were lying, possibly lying, that they were coming to court in multiple homicide cases, that they were receiving illegal deals and promises that weren't going through any type of proper channels. So when I received this information, I would send it to innocent projects and say, man, look, man, this is exactly what happened to me. The man who did it to me is mentioned in these memorandums. So several different innocent projects over the years took my case and worked on it 3 years, 4 years. And they would all say, we don't have enough to get you out, even though, and I would ask them, I say, man, so somebody could just come in off the street, say I confessed to them, no other evidence at all, and I can be sitting in prison forever. And that's exactly what happened, man. So speaking of the memorandums, and these are things that I didn't know during trial. All I know during trial is that someone is lying on me. I really don't know what's going on to that extent. But once I'm in prison and I start searching for evidence to prove that I'm innocent, and I come across these memorandums, we also found sentencing transcripts that have been hidden. So you had like a handful of men, 3, 4 men who were testifying on dozens. When I say dozens, like one of the sentencing transcripts, during the time when they was going to give him a deal, the judge asked the police, the homicide detectives, how many cases had that man helped them out on, and the homicide detective said, I'd say at least 20. And this is where this man came to court over and over again, alleging that people were confessing to him in the precinct. Mind you, the precincts in Detroit are meant to be 72 hours and out. It's just a place that you get arrested and they're going to figure out what they're going to do. These men were living in the precinct for 3 years, 7 months. They just had an illegal system set up where when the police go to a crime scene, they gather evidence, they take statements, and some of the things is just what it is. They find shell casings, they can see a house may have been rummaged through. Some of the things just are what they are. So the police take the evidence that they do know and they write a script and they give it to one of these men and they say, you're going to say Lucino confessed this to you. So you go to trial, the man comes to court and says, Lucino confessed this to me. What he's testifying to is factually accurate according to things that have been found. And then the prosecutor's argument is, well, if Lucino didn't tell him, then how would he know? And it's a good argument to make because no one is sitting there thinking that the police are the ones who were giving these men the information. And based on that and that alone, I did almost 27 years incarcerated in a Michigan prison.
Brother, I want to back up for a moment because you said something at the beginning. I didn't want to cut you off.
Yes, sir.
You said that they accuse you of murdering your mother.
Yes, sir.
I just want people to just let that sink in for a moment because of the nature of our criminal justice system. That during this trial, no one thought to themselves, obviously, what it would take for a young man to do such a thing. I know that she was your foster mother, but for all intents and purposes, she was a mother to you, Miss Bias.
I used to, when I'm in there, I'm trying to do any and everything I can to, convince people to try to marshal some sort of help. Right. And I know I used to write people and, I'm trying to plead my case. And I would tell people that I remember one time talking back to my mom, had to be about 10, 11. I've been fighting. And my mom, come down the street, get me, walk me home. And my mom would look at me and she said, you down there getting your butt kicked. And I looked at my mom and said, I wasn't getting my butt kicked. I had a lot of respect. That's the only time I ever talked back to my mom. But I had a lot of respect for my mom. I didn't curse around my mom. Mm-hmm. My mom was an old school mama and she wasn't buying it to begin with, right? But I had a lot of respect for my mom. Me and my mom didn't have, we had our ups and downs as far as, I had a real rocky childhood, but it was never, it's just amazing, for that accusation. One of the things is when I went to the Wayne County Jail, I had a complete mental collapse. I was taken to the mental health floor at the Wayne County Jail, and my depression, it got so bad, they sent me to an outside hospital, and unfortunately, all they was doing was like doping me up. But I repeated this process 3 or 4 times during trial. You know, it was like you say, man, it was extremely difficult. I mean, you could just imagine, man, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So many questions go unanswered. A lot of people have faith that when the police make an accusation that is true, or that there has to be some validity to it, or people say, well, if he didn't do nothing, then why would they even be messing with him, right?
Right.
I mean, it was a difficult situation all the way around. Then, I mean, even with the prison aspect, I tell people this, man. I like telling people this. I did 27 years in prison and never got in a fight, never stabbed no one. That really wasn't a part of what I had going on. But there's a special category in prison for people who kill their mothers or
Mm.
people who harm children. Going in prison with that, over my head as well, and having to convince these guys, and that's not even really a place where people care. All they know is, hey man, guy in prison for this. I mean, I was fortunate, like I said, I didn't have those experiences. I thank God for that. It was a lot of miraculous things that happened to me during my incarceration. But yeah, it was a real, I don't even know how to explain it, man. You know what I'm saying? But it was definitely the hardest thing I had to deal with, trying to say that I'm innocent and dealing with the burden of that,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. You're right. People do just out of hand believe the police. They would say, like, why would they pick you? Like, why would they lie about you? As if police don't have numbers to make, they don't have quotas to fill, as if our system isn't privatized. I know that I was reading that in Detroit or in Michigan, West Michigan, I don't know if all the prisons are privatized, but there are services that are privatized. So for all intents and purposes, they're making money off of the incarceration
Hey
process.
man, I'm so glad you said that, right? I explained to people that at one time Michigan had a private prison, whereas like a Whacking Hut or Corporations of America ran it. It was Baldwin where they kept juveniles at. It's closed. By all intents and purposes, all of the prisons in Michigan are ran by the state. But as you said, and I'm glad you pointed that out, the phones are privatized, the healthcare is privatized, the food service is privatized, the commentary. So even though I think Michigan has one of the more sophisticated privatized prison systems because it looks like it's being ran by the state, but they've actually just parceled all of the pieces out and it's still privatized. But by the definition that some people look for, like I said, a Whacking Hut or a Corporation of America, no, there are many different ways to privatize prisons, and Michigan has a model for states on how to privatize and continue to look like it's a state-ran prison system.
Incentivized for profit. I appreciate us being able to show that because, as we know, what they're selling now is that, well, we want to get away from the private prison industry. But are they talking about removing those elements, those pieces that are privatized, even once you do remove those bigger corporations from actually running the facilities? Um, also, Mr. Hamilton, 19 years old.
Yes, sir.
19 years old. 19 years old. I'm thinking about what I was doing at 19 years old. And I know I don't want to jump too far here to your exoneration, but I just want people to understand what you're going through in that scenario, in prison, knowing innocent. Like, I want people to know, Mr. Hamilton, once he got out, he was already innocent. They're affirming his innocence. They're not proving him innocent. He was already innocent when he went in. So how does a 19-year-old adapt to that environment? How do you make it, Mr. Hamilton?
Well, so as I said, when I first was incarcerated in the Wayne County Jail, it took about 2 years to go to trial. I
Mhm.
spent the entire 2 years back and forth trying to get some sort of mental health services. Like I say, this was just, a lot on me at that time. I never dealt with anything like that. So when I come to prison, I'm a shell of who I was, prior to this. I'm lethargic in my movements. I might look like someone you may see on the show and they want to kind of show their mental patient in that stupor. That's sort of how I was. And I'm thankful. Like I say, they sent me to Jackson Prison. It was one of the rougher prisons,
Mm.
more older. It was just one of the more rougher prisons. And I probably wasn't in a position where I could have defended myself, right? Just by the medicine and all of these things. I met an Islamic group in there off the day I went in there. Some of the men knew my father. Some of the men knew me from the streets, had seen me, interacted with my dad. And, they was kind of at a shock at what they saw. I'm a vibrant, guy, right? So the group, for the all intents and purposes, sort of took me under their wing, man. Helped me get off the medicine because the medicine wasn't helping. Started getting me to exercise and started putting books in my hand. And that's sort of like the beginning of me getting into a situation where I could get ready to start this fight to get up out of prison. So yeah, nice. So that's how I kind of came in prison. I came in prison messed up in the head. And I met a group of guys who, kind of helped get me up out of that and set me on the path of educating myself to where I would be able to, like I say, marshal the help I needed to liberate myself up out of prison.
50 to 80 years, ladies and gentlemen. 50 to 80 years. Second-degree murder, felony firearms charges, appeal to the Michigan Court of Appeals, and the Michigan Supreme Court. And both times you were turned down, denied. So, brother, what was different about the evidence that was finally presented that they accepted your appeal?
Well, I want to back up a little bit what you said. So usually in prison, people in my situation, you don't hear just they went to the Court of Appeals and the Michigan Court of Appeals. You hear they went to the Court of Appeal, the Michigan Court of Appeal, the feds, back down to the lower courts, back to the Court of Appeals, back to the Michigan Court of Appeals. This is sort of the process for guys who've been in prison a long time who fighting their case. Well, early on, I abandoned the court system. That's why I only went to 2 courts. Most of the men who went there with me and fighting a similar battle probably been up and down the court several times. But early in my prison sentence, with some gentleman explaining to me that the courts really don't care if you're innocent or not. But I went over to the prison law library and I started reading some statistics. So for an example, the Court of Appeals, 90% of the people who go through the Court of Appeals receive no action. This is just a consistent number. So only 10% of the people who go through here will get any type of action. And there's a lot of different things that can be done, just not letting people out. It could be going back and correcting the wording in a sentence or something like that. But the whole, whatever's going to happen, only 10% of the people. So I'm like, damn, you got to kind of get lucky, right? So then I'm looking, most people are saying that the federal courts will be your best chance to get out, but I'm reading the federal court statistics and they're higher than that. So I just didn't think that I wasn't trying to get lucky. And I didn't believe that the courts would agree with me. I wasn't trying to say that a mistake had been made. I was saying that the Detroit Homicide Division framed me for murder. They know I didn't do it. They fabricated evidence. They fabricated a witness. And I didn't think the courts would have the courage to admit something like that, let alone take some steps to do something.
To open
right?
up a can of worms that they are running. Exactly. I get it. Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to kind of back up there. So early on, some of the older gentlemen are encouraging me to begin writing, lawyers asking for help, colleges asking for help. Just, the innocent projects are kind of just really getting going. And they saying, look, man, maybe you can get lucky, basically, right? So I don't have any type of structure or guidance. I'm just writing letters. I'm writing letters and writing letters and writing letters.
My understanding, Lucino, 500 letters.
No, I wrote over 10,000 letters while I was
10,000
incarcerated.
letters.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I wrote over 10,000 letters while I was incarcerated. But I received a letter, and I mean, it's just strange to strike on that number, right? I kind of received a letter that, it had a big impact on me. I wrote the Wayne State Law Clinic, asking for some help. And their response was that they get 10,000 letters a year just like mine, and they can only help the extraordinary people. And I first went through this sort of anger because, I get these rejection letters all the time. I'm thinking my stuff is extraordinary. But at some point, I sat back and thought, everybody I'm writing is probably getting large volumes of information. I mean, these letters, and all of these letters probably say the same thing. I got messed over and I need help. But since I'm seeing it no other option at this time than the writing, I'm telling myself, I got to keep writing, so I got to get better. And that sort of helped fuel this education thing I went on while I was in there. So now I'm trying to teach myself just how to write letters better. And I found out how useless going to the 12th grade was in the Detroit public system because I couldn't even put a grammatically correct sentence together.
Mm.
So I'm getting books on like how to write a sentence, how to condense a sentence, how to write a paragraph, and it doesn't seem to be working. I'm saying that I got to be able to articulate the same things that everybody else saying, but be able to do it in a way to make my letters stick out. And if this wasn't working, now I'm saying I need some content. Maybe if I can put something in here to show that I can think a little bit or something about my letter. So I'm taking in large volumes of information around this time. So now I'm trying to write these letters. I used to tell people in prison that I'm gonna write my way out of prison. Essentially that's what I did. It's a little deeper than that, but yeah, so I spent about 14 to 18 hours a day on my typewriter with a book. And I just beat out letters, man. I beat out letters. I started writing articles. I'm going a little quicker. It's some things I'm leaving out, but ultimately that's about how it happened.
Right.
I started writing. I met, and I had a lot of people to help me out. Somewhere in there, I gotta mention them. But I met a woman named Maya Shinwer, who was like the chief editor and still is of Truth Out magazine. And they encouraged me to write an article for them. And that sort of was really the big difference. Once I wrote that article, and other people started requesting I write articles after that. So I started getting published pretty frequently while I was in prison. There was the university community, professors in particular, but the university community was so big because there were so many different colleges or universities that struck up personal relationships with me, did many different things to try to help me get free. But the one thing they consistently did was fed my appetite for information. And it was extraordinary because there was probably no other way I would have access to what I call a better quality of information, right?
Mm.
Um, academic information. Um, so I had just a tremendous amount of help along the way as well from a few
Right.
different people, right?
So how does the Innocence Project come into play with your journey?
So a woman named Claudia Whitman who she started out fighting for death row prisoners,
Mm.
right? And I believe the first person she started helping in Michigan was a man named Danny Brooks. And she lives in Denver. In Colorado, and it's kind of extraordinary. A woman who lives in Colorado, she's assisted in the exoneration of numerous men here in Michigan. So I had this woman's help, and man, I was a headache to her. But her relationships with the innocent clinics, made it easier for myself and a lot of other men to get our information before them because she was a private investigator. So a lot of time when she brings a case to them, she's brought it with a lot of work that's already done and sort of lays the things out where they can see it, right? But that's sort of what happened in 2017. The Wayne County created a conviction integrity unit. And through the Roots Action in New York, a group who did a lot of campaigning on my behalf and just kept at the prosecutor's office to say this man shouldn't be in here. Just keep reiterating what we knew. And with their help, just a lot of different people help, people doing the signatures, people signing things. It was a lot of it was really, like they said, a community effort, right? And it was help from all over the country. Like, I keep saying, here's somebody from Colorado that came down with
Right.
fly in and, go walk to, and it's little bitty woman, what we would call elderly. I know she wouldn't take offense at me saying that, but I mean, this little bitty woman, the champion of freedom of men all the way here in Michigan.
It's a beautiful thing, a beautiful thing.
Yes, sir.
People need to know, excuse me, about the Innocence Project. They have eliminated 3,690 years of Innocence Project clients collectively spent wrongfully incarcerated. That's almost 4,000 years of people's time, life years of individuals. Innocence Project clients exonerated by DNA 193. Mr. Hamilton's one of those folks. They found DNA. So I read about the DNA evidence, but the thing is, at the time, it wasn't a common thing. Like, we all hear about DNA now, but back in the 90s, that was brand new technology, right, Mr. Hamilton? So what difference, what happened? They found the DNA, or you were able finally to see the records that they had DNA and they had not compared you to that DNA to do a match, or how did that work out?
So I was fighting my case probably just as hard as I guess, anybody in there trying to say that they're in there for something they didn't do, but I'm fighting. And one of the things that I noticed early on is that the Innocent Projects leaned in favor of DNA evidence, right? If you had some DNA evidence, this seemed to be something. So I never knew if there was DNA evidence or not, but I repeatedly filed Freedom of Information requests just in case there was, right? Just in case there was, I'm trying to see if there was some. I filed them repeatedly. My lawyers, Mary Shatur and Takura, who had my case 7 years pro bono, and are also, like I say, without them, I wouldn't be here, right? But they literally filed 5 or 6 dozen Freedom of Information acts that were just being ignored, where we were trying to seek different information. I say that to say this: when the Innocent Project, and it's really the Conviction Integrity Unit, the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit, right? When they called me and said that they were going to take my case, it was like a Monday. Wednesday, I get information again. They found DNA evidence, and it was that simple because when they went to go get the box, like how they show you on TV, they say when they went and opened the box, it was just sitting there. So it wasn't a sense of that it wasn't there, and not just that, DNA evidence, fingerprints, different things that they just, didn't make available that, maybe could have stopped this years ago, right?
Yes.
So,
yes,
it was sitting there the whole time.
It was not hidden. It wasn't
right.
hidden.
It was right there.
So they take this newly discovered evidence that they hadn't taken. I meant to ask you this. You did not have, what kind of defense did you have? Did you have a public defender when you
Yes, sir. When I went through court, I went through several attorneys, right? So I'm in here, and basically the attorneys are telling me that, well, there's no evidence, we just gonna go to trial. And I'm saying, like, no, I shouldn't even be going to trial, man. Y'all should be doing something to get me out the county jail, not just, so I went through a lot of different attorneys just trying to get someone to speak up for me. So I gotta say, man, I don't want to just bash them because it's deeper. A lot of those men and women are competent, but there are things structured into that whole system that doesn't allow them to perform well. So for one, the criminal defense system is just underfunded, period. And no matter how good of an attorney you are, if you don't have the money to hire the investigators or the experts or the people you may need to assist, then that's one of the reasons why attorneys seek to get cops to seek to get plea deals, because that's basically the type of money that they're paying them for anyway. They're not paying them to go to trial and fight cases. But at the same time, the prosecutor office has unlimited resources. There's nothing that the prosecutor doesn't need that the prosecutor can't acquire. So there are things like that as well. I don't just want to sit here and bash these men and women. There are some good men and women in the criminal defense system, but the system itself is not structured for what is essentially poor defendants to be able to put up the sort of defense that would allow them to really stand a chance in what they say is fair, but isn't.
And look, and I appreciate your deference and not wanting to bash those people. So it's a systemic issue. But
Yes, sir.
I want to point out that with Mr. Hamilton, he's gracious, very gracious here, but folks, we are talking about innocent men and women. I mean, until you are convicted, you are innocent. You have the presumption of innocence. So we're not spending money to defend innocent people, because that's what we're assuming. That should be the assumption, right?
I wanted to speak to the larger issue. Listen, everything that was going on, everyone knew, right? These men, like I say, you had one particular man who testified in 20 murders, right? His face got to start looking frequent to somebody if you coming in and out of court that much. Dealing with the homicide office is a very small little section where my point is everyone knew, that the prosecutors knew, the judges knew, the police knew. They had some good going on. They had a system to where they could create the evidence that they needed. And as you said, something that really doesn't get pointed out, everybody benefited from this except the people they were doing it to. You know, when police solve crimes, you know, people get rewarded for doing things like that. Prosecutors get rewarded for getting convictions. Judges get rewarded for giving time. You know, everyone being silent in a system where they're being rewarded, you know. So I do know that there are individual actors.
Mr. Hamilton, same person keeps miraculously people just come into the system who are only going to be there a few days and start telling them about crimes they supposedly committed. They just start confessing. They meet this guy, and he's such a great guy. I don't know what it is about this guy, but people all of a sudden tell him their life story.
I never spoke to the man. He claimed that he was coming down the hallway sweeping, and I stopped him and just told him, you know, all this stuff. But I never spoke with him. It was just a plan that, like I say, they have a scheme going on where they can get convictions, and mostly for what I know, young black males. And like I say, everybody in this system benefited. The police benefited, the prosecutors. Everybody could hang their hat on these convictions and say that they're doing a good job, quote unquote, fighting crime, when they were doing just the opposite. They were committing crimes.
So we get the DNA evidence. Well, we discovered that the DNA evidence is there. So then they get your DNA, compare it to the DNA found under, I think it was the left finger, one of the fingers on the left hand of.
Man, I got a friend. He always say, but that's not the crazy part, right? It's not. So when they get the DNA, you know, I'm thinking like, okay, they tested DNA, I'm out of here. It take a year for the results to come back. And I'm thinking like, what can be a more pressing issue than to get this DNA tested so we can get me out of here, right? When the DNA come back, the Michigan State Police, which was the agency tasked with testing it, said the DNA could be mine. You know, and I'm saying I'm telling my lawyers it's not possible for the DNA to be mine. So thanks to the Cooley Innocent Project, the Cooley Law School Innocent Project, that it received a grant along with my lawyers, again, who taking money out of their pockets, right? If we didn't have that money to send this off to one of the leading experts in the country who tested it and said, this is no way this could be Latinos. Basically, they believe the expert over the Michigan State Police. But had those resources not been there, and I just had to go on the word of the Michigan State Police, I could possibly still be in prison, and that may have nailed the casket forever.
They said the evidence could point to you. Well, did they test that evidence, or they're saying hypothetically it could point to you?
No, when they tested it, whatever they did, they came back. Michigan has historically had problems. Like, for an example, the Detroit Crime Lab had been shut down. They was just in there fabricating evidence, right? So then they tasked all of the stuff that go to Detroit now to the Michigan State Police. I mean, what's the difference? You know, what's the difference? But the point is, it's historically been problems because what a lot of people don't know, a lot of these things that we hear on TV about fingerprints, about bite marks, those things are not exact sciences like we think they are. You know, you'll see people show the little maybe technology, go over the fingerprint, and then it. No, there is a lot of still human
input into these
input
tests.
into it. It's a lot more human input into it than it is. These men and women they testify as experts because this is what they do as a profession and have been doing it for so long. And they may give people the impression that everything that happens is scientific in some of these processes, and they're not.
One of the things I run into, Mr. Hamilton, is I have these people that just blindly believe the system. They just blindly believe that the system doesn't make mistakes. They blindly believe that the system is, they just believe. I think they watch too much TV. They watch too many movies, and they can't imagine either that, or they just don't want to grapple with the reality that what they believe could be untrue and that things are not fair. That things are not fair. Folks, Innocence Project has exonerated. Well, I don't even know if that's the right term. Is that the right term, Lucino? Innocence Project victories today. Let's say victories, because I don't want to get it, because they don't do the exonerating. They do, they provide the information that could lead to exoneration. 239 Innocent Project victories to date. 239 folks. 84 people who were actually committed the crime were identified from the 239 client exonerations and releases. 32 states plus DC where Innocent Project client victories have been won. There's a disproportionate amount of Black folks, 59%, 58% Black, 34% white, 1% Asian, and 7% Latinx. So it just shows the disproportionate impact of wrongful convictions on Black people.
The Conviction Integrity Unit, what they do is they tear a case down, and they have a team, sort of kind of guys what you see on TV. They got people who specialize in different areas, and they tear a case down, and they go back over and start from the beginning and start taking a look at the case. They go back, they review records, they talk to witnesses, they go back to scene of crime, they interview me and other people several times. They do lie detector tests. It's an elaborate process.
Wow.
That they go to for them to have some certainty with it. So, like I said, there were a lot of pieces of evidence. I had a private investigator who went out to the area, and this was years later, 17, 18 years later, canvassing the area. We did this a few different 6-month intervals, and we started receiving a few phone calls that led to some information of people who knew the actual shooter, things of that nature, right? Information that had been provided to the prosecutor's office some years before I was actually exonerated. If it weren't for that DNA, I'd still be in there. And I mean, we had a tremendous amount of, first of all, there was no evidence to say I did it. But we had a tremendous amount of evidence that said I didn't do it, that something was wrong here. But if it wasn't for that DNA evidence, that's one of the pitfalls of the, all of the people that they have released. I could imagine how many more could have been if there wasn't such the stiff regulations that they put. So for an example, you have to have new evidence. Somebody who's been in prison 20 years may not be able to come up with new evidence. And then what happens when they have enough old evidence to say they're innocent, but you got a rule that says, but you got to present something new. And that's how it is in Michigan. No matter how much evidence a person may have to say that they didn't commit a crime, if they can't produce something new, and for me, the DNA was new. If they can't produce something new, they'll still be in prison because the law says you got to have something new. And that's really just a barrier because few people will be able to climb through that window.
Mr. Hamilton, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, and I'm sure I just want my audience to think about this. We know Mr. Hamilton did not commit this crime. We have scientifically proven this, but this man was convicted without an eyewitness, with no physical evidence, no fingerprints on, no forensics, just a person in jail who says, he told me he did it. And that was enough to take away 26 years of a man's life. And if Mr. Hamilton did not have these amazing angels of justice having his back, if he didn't have a great fortune of having this project, who happened to have the money to do this, and he had somebody work for him 7 years pro bono.
I also had my investigator, Claudia Whitman, work with me for like 15 years. One of my best friends, Dr. Dorothy B. Farden of Boyd State, about 20 years. Like you said, there were some amazing people along the way who did everything they could to try to bring some attention to my situation, marshal resources.
Not to mention, Mr. Hamilton had memorandums where people would talk and saying, hey, we basically put together cases. We basically build cases, fabricate cases. But because they didn't specifically say, Mr. Hamilton's case is BS, and we're going to put this together for Mr. Hamilton and lie and put him under the bus, because it didn't explicitly, am I getting this right? Because they didn't explicitly say it was you that they were doing this too, just because they said they did these things, that wasn't enough in court.
Well, the memorandums actually were enough. Prosecutors have a duty to seek justice, not a win, right? So when this information was given, the prosecutors had an obligation to look at these cases and to do something to stop them. You know, something obviously isn't right here. We have people talking openly about men fabricating evidence in order to receive illegal deals. So the prosecutors, or anybody for that amount, who we showed these memorandums to along the way. Like I said, I thought it was going to be difficult for anyone to admit that I was framed. I mean, it take a lot for a judge or a prosecutor because of how that system works. You know, they all work on the same team, and you don't go around. And the thing about it was, to release me, I thought to release me or Raymond Ward. Today, 4 people have been released on this: Darnell Smith, Ramon Ward, Bernard Howard, and myself. All 4 of us who was caught up in this. But as I said, one man, they said, testified in over 20-some murders. We know that the man who testified against me testified against at least 7. There was a small handful of men doing this. They've only released 4. See, I always thought that, well, they're not going to release me because to release me, they're going to have to release a lot of people. Well, I was wrong on that. They did release me, but they didn't release the other people. So I tell people I got lucky. You know, I can't say that justice was done when there are other people suffering what I suffered still in there. You know, and as grateful as I am for the prosecutor, Kim Worthy, who signed my papers, for Valerie Newman of the Conviction Integrity Unit, who fought for me. You know, usually when I get an opportunity to go somewhere, I ask for those 2 women to be fired, because I'm hoping that somebody will ask, why will you want the people who your freedom was in their hands? Why would you want them fired? I'm hoping people would ask me that question, so it gives me an opportunity to say, because there's other men and women in there and they know it, and they're not doing anything to immediately end their suffering the way that mine has been ended. You know, there are dozens of other men and possibly women too in there that we know simply from the records that we found of how many cases these men did this on.
The cost of DNA testing, $5,000 and $50,000 for one case. So, Mr. Hamilton, how are you doing, brother? You're a free man. You have been out since 2020. Tell me about your life, man. What's on the horizon? How are you telling your story besides coming on the Tim Black Show?
Abolition. That's what I got on the rise. For me, just to back up a little bit, the first time I went to segregation, I've been in prison, locked about 2, 3 years. I've seen people go to segregation for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. So in my prison experience, people go to the hole for maybe about 6 months.
That's what segregation is. Segregation. That's what the hole.
Solitary confinement, right?
Okay.
The hole, solitary confinement.
Okay.
The hole is a better description of it. But so I'm in segregation, and they have I'm going to a maximum security prison, and they have a process that when you come, the administrators, what they call the Security Classification Committee, tell you what to expect while you're at their prison. This is maximum security prison. We don't play type stuff. So when I go see this Security Classification Committee, they tell me that I will be in prison. I will be in segregation forever, right? So I don't even believe it though. Remember, my prison experience tells me that people only do 6 months in segregation. So even though this was told to me, I don't believe it. I don't. I don't even believe it. I'm like, what? I'm actually arguing with them. Like, I'm thinking they're trying to scare me, right? So I go back to the housing unit, and an older gentleman across the hall asks me, what did they say? And I tell him, he said, man, if they told you you're going to be in segregation forever, you're going to be in here forever. I'm like, man, I don't want to hear that. I don't believe it, right? Because my experience in prison, I've been here about 3 years, telling me something totally different. I've never seen anybody in solitary confinement for more than 6 months. So the man named Thompson Bay, he comes to the door and he yells out and he says, Bell Bay, how long have you been in the hole? And Bell Bay yells out 12 years. And then he yells out to Green Eyes. He says, Green Eyes, how long have you been in the hole? And he yells out 7 years. And then he yells out to a man named Kenyatta Yield and says, how long have you been in the hole? And he says 9 years. And he asks him, he said, how much longer are you going to be in here? And Kenyatta Yield yelled back, well, they told me I'm going to be here until I go home, and I have 9 more years. I was floored. I didn't even know things like this existed. I mean, even though I've been in prison 3 or 4 years, I didn't know that there was levels. You know how people say there's levels to this shit? I didn't know there was levels like that, right? So that had my attention. Right? So a day or two later, the gentleman who was speaking with me, he sent me something over there. He said, man, maybe you should read this. And it was something on there that said behavior modification units. And that's another term for solitary confinement. It's something that academics or so-called social scientists may call it. So I'm reading this information and it's blowing my wig back, right? People are openly, doctors and scientists and people that's in these different disciplines in these universities, they're openly discussing the emotional and psychological harms of solitary confinement. They're talking about how some international bodies consider this torture, right? It's blowing my wig back, right? That somebody would put somebody in a situation like this. So the older gentleman comes back to the door and he said, look down the hall. He said, read what's on that first door. The door said behavior modification cell. He said, keep reading, young blood. That had such a big impact on me becoming an abolitionist. As I read that information and I'm reading what they're saying it does to people, I immediately tell myself, I don't want this happening to me, right? So I want to acquire as much information as I can on this subject so I can educate myself, learn all I can, so I can build up some sort of defense against this. The only defense that I was able to build up in prison was to reject prison as much as I was able to do under that set of circumstances. There was no way for me to digest some harm and think that it was some way going to help me. I was in an environment that's designed to crush the human spirit. Prisons have one thing in mind: control. And control on a level to where they're micromanaging people's behavior by the minute. You have 5 minutes for this, 3 minutes for this, 2 minutes for this. And in order for that system to run, people must become passive recipients of what the prison is dishing out to where you know where you got to be in the next 3 minutes. And you got to get up or else the machine don't run. The machine don't run if everybody, because everything is micromanaged in blocks. So as I'm reading, I'm trying to acquire information to prevent what I'm reading to happen to me. And it kind of led me to a lot of different disciplines: sociology, anthropology, criminology, penology. As I'm reading these things about the prison, I'm telling myself, I'm going to make prison a study of mine. One of the things I had the opportunity to help mentor some of the young men who came in there. And out of all the different things we would talk about, I had 2 or 3 things, maybe 4, that I would try to impress upon them. One of those things was, you're probably going to meet a lot of men in here who feel they know everything about prison. They're experts. They've been in here 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. There's some people in here that'll tell you they know everything about it. And I would tell them it's true that they know some things, but they usually know prison from how it feels. Just the experience of how it feels when it comes to what a criminologist says, or penologist, or sociologist, or all the other sciences and disciplines that go up into this. Very few prisoners have a clue, because who studies prison? But I would encourage them to study prison so that they can have a better understanding of what they're experiencing, more than just on their skin, to understand why policies are their way, or certain processes are the way that they are, some of the perspectives that are built into the criminal justice system. But taking in this information, I began to understand that a harm was being caused, and it was being caused in plain sight. And obviously no one had a problem with it, because people who are labeled as prisoners, people who are labeled as convicts or criminals, just like the 13th Amendment says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except whereas one convicted of a crime shall exist in the United States. So except, once somebody has been convicted of a crime, not only does the state give themselves the permission to have this constitutional slave system, but the perception, or whatever work has been done, people believe that whatever's happening to people after they went through this process, they deserve it. And I don't think people have a real understanding of what it means to micromanage someone's behavior by the minute. What does it take? One of the things they call prison work is people work, and they relate people work to working on furniture, to working on objects, and that's what incarcerated men and women are. They're objects. You're not, something you may think about or don't think about is that when you're incarcerated, you can't go to the refrigerator, you can't take a bath, you can't walk down the street. People know that those sort of liberties have been taken from you. But in order for that experiment to actually work, they have to start taking things that are natural to who you are as a human being. So for an example, charisma has no place in prison. Charisma has no place in prison, because there's no need for you to be charismatic in there. All you need to do is follow directions, do what you're told, So those sort of things are taken. Influence has no place in prison, because you're not there to be influential to anybody. You're there to do what you're told. I tell people I have a larger than life personality, but that has no place in prison. See, there are things like that that are taken away that we don't even think about it, because those things don't fit in the space that has been designed for you to sit and rot in. It doesn't have no place. Nowhere in prison is your charisma needed. So they take it so that you don't use it, because using it can become a threat
to the system.
No, not just to the system, because it's a display of your humanness. See, one of the reasons why people ask me, people see me and they say, damn, man, I would have never known you was in prison 27 years, right? People think I came out normal. I mean, I don't know what that means, but they think I came out unexpected. Hearing some of the things I went to, being in the hole about 11 years, doing about 13 years in maximum security. They kept me on this status called Security Threat Group, which is the Michigan Department's equivalency of Guantanamo Bay. Once they label you a security threat group, you're gonna be monitored, sort of like what they show us on TV. You know, I tell people they fucked over me in there. You know, they really made that 27 years hard for me in there, because when I went in there and educated myself and I started learning about the prison system, I started trying to alert other people through my articles and through my writings what was happening in prison. And prior to me getting, prior to me starting to get published frequently, you know, I would do things like start my own blog, write news. I would just anywhere I could write and send articles. A lot of the people that I was writing for help, I would send my articles to them because I was hoping, unfortunately, America seems to invest people who they see value in.
Mm.
And value usually means something marketable or something extraordinary. Extraordinary means marketable. You know, so when I would write people, I wanted people to see value in me. So when I would write for help, I may send an article with it, so people could maybe read and say, man, this guy can think a little bit. You know, maybe people might want to help me because they thought that I had something of value. So I started sending articles everywhere you could imagine, and they made it hard for me. I mentored men about prison from an abolitionist perspective. You know, so just quickly, if you don't mind, you know, one of my goals is to try to redefine what abolition means. You know, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with the definitions we have now, but in order to express the urgency in abolition, you know, to me, abolition means ending harm now. Simple as that. If you know someone is being harmed, and it's usually like that. You know, I tell people, if a child goes to school and the counselor thinks that this child is being abused at home, they'll call people to the school and remove the child without even talking to the mother. They'll notify the mother later. You know, that they say that this child was in a situation that was so detrimental, we had to take immediate action.
Immediate intervention, right.
Right. I tell people that if you had a sister or mother that was being abused and you were sitting outside in the car with her and she trying to go back in the house, there's nothing that she could tell you that you would say, or would just go back in there. I don't have no money. We'll figure it out. I don't have no clothes. We'll figure it out. I don't care what she tells you. You say, look, we will figure that shit out, but we don't want you going back into a situation. No one is going to say, well, listen, once we figure all that out, we'll be back to get you.
We'll come back to get you. Mm-hmm.
See, our society already have the concept of when someone is being harmed to end it immediately. And that's what abolition means. Abolition means when we know there's a harm, we should be doing everything we can to intervene to end and bring that to an end. Well, one thing about the criminal justice system, we know for a fact that big parts of the American population are being harmed. For an example, a lot of people have heard this. People of color are treated different, meaning unfairly, from the moment they have police contact to whatever the conclusion is. It's not the same system. It's an unfair system. Treats people different. Same thing for women. Same thing for gays, lesbians, and transgenders. They have a different criminal and justice experience, means unfair. Same thing, people of not economic means. Yes. The type of money you got often impacts what type of justice you receive or don't receive, meaning unfair. It's illegitimate. Another thing, you know, I'm from Detroit. I tell people that if the Lakers came down to Detroit and was playing and the refs are clearly cheating, the refs don't call one foul the whole night for the Lakers, not one, right? The scoreboard is putting 5 and 6 points down every time they shoot a basket. There's nothing anybody could say to say that win was legitimate. I don't care, no one could say you had an opportunity to put your best 5 out there to compete. No matter what they say, man, but y'all cheated. It wasn't even fair. That's how the criminal justice system is. It's not fair. It treats people different from beginning to end. And that's just one example. I mean, there's a multitude. That's just the 3 that I figure like, well, we know this based upon so much data, so much analytics. We can prove that people of color, women, gays, people of low economic means. It's an unfair system. It's not legitimate. How do you accept the results of something that you know is unfair to so many people in the population? And for some reason, like I say, when it comes to incarcerated men and women, all the rules change. There are people that will sit and articulate much better than I can the harm of incarceration. But abolition even seems crazy to them, bringing it to an end. Why would you allow someone to stay in a situation where you know they're being harmed? And that's what society, American society in particular, has done when it comes to incarcerated men and women. And unfortunately, the people that's incarcerated often look like the people America seems not to like anyway. Black people are disproportionately represented in that system, as you said, but it's also a system where poor whites, more and more poor white people are entering the criminal justice system for the same reason that poor Black people have been. Gays, lesbians, transgender. Most of the people that society sort of picks on out here, those are the people that seems to be all overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So that's what I'm into now. I'm into abolition. I'm into trying to find ways to do what you're doing, but I'm trying to find a way to talk about abolition in ways to where it doesn't just seem like some crazy people just trying to tear something down and have chaos in America. What are we going to do without prisons? What will happen if we take all the prisons? Well, the first thing is, I try to ask people, wouldn't you like to live in a world where there were no prisons? If we could, and just in the put your wine, wouldn't you love to live in a world like that? They be like, yeah, I would love to live in a world like that. I say, well, what you think it'd take to live in a world like that? Well, it'd take this, right. In order to imagine living in a world without prisons, we have to imagine living in a different world.
That's true.
See, there's no way to just pull that up out of here and then say we're going to go on about our business. Everything that's happening in our world is by choice. These are not universal laws. This isn't gravity. The school system could do whatever we wanted the school system to do. I ask people, are you drinking water?
Yes.
See, someone to say that water is essential. You can't live without it. You gotta have water.
Right.
If that's true, I want to live in a society that doesn't place barriers in between me and something that's essential. I want to live in a society that says this is essential. So one of the goals of our society is to ensure that everyone has it, independent of race, class, all those things. See, the world could be different. Water doesn't have to be a commodity.
Right.
It doesn't have to be. Somebody chose to make water a commodity. Somebody chose to make healthcare, food, clothes, the essentials of life. Things that we say are essential, the society has put barriers there. Now, it's one thing if a barrier comes, but it's different when you put the barrier there and structure the barrier in. So I want to have a conversation, with as many people as I can about ending harm in our country.
When you talk about abolition, Mr. Hamilton, what do you tell people about safety? Because I think part of the pushback you will receive is people saying, well, we're not safe. How do we protect ourselves if we don't have prisons? Where do the bad people go? So what's your response to that?
Okay, first, I've encountered this recently with some people I thought I wouldn't need to encounter it with. I said this and somebody asked me, well, where are they going to put the real criminals? I say, who? You say the guys running the pharmaceutical companies? You talking about the real criminals? You talking about the people selling weapons all over the world, knowing that these weapons are going to be used to mass kill people, to oppress? Are you talking about those real criminals right there? Are you talking about the police force? And not just the spectacular events where we may catch a murder on film, but the day-to-day terror. The day-to-day terror, the reason why people feel a certain way when they see the police. Irregardless if you're doing nothing or not, you feel a certain way.
That's right.
The day-to-day terror, right? you talking about those people? I tell people that the same people that invented the 13th Amendment also created the word crime. This is a political term. It's a political term because it's not a crime for what the pharmaceutical companies do. They're allowed to sell pharmaceutical grade heroin in the form of pills. It's not illegal. It's the same thing in pill form. It's a political thing. Marijuana is illegal in Michigan. Now it's legal. I try to tell people this, man, as I think about the law. I said, imagine if that you have a significant other and you come in the house at too late, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, whatever is too late for you, and an argument ensues. You run to the back room, you grab a notebook, you flip through the page, you say, baby, right here, it says I can come in the house whenever I want. What is that? It's the rules. The rules, she don't care about what you wrote in that book. That might escalate the fight. She might go to trying to grab it and rip that garbage up. See, that's what the law is. It's just some garbage somebody wrote in a notebook. See, they'll shoot somebody in the head 2 times in Grand Rapids. And then they'll say, oh, look here, it's justified. Man, who cares what you wrote in there? Of course you say it's justified. I wrote in my notebook that I can come home whenever I want. They say, well, we're going to give people life in prison forever because they got caught with X amount of drugs. And people complain about it. They say, but it's the law, man. No, that's some garbage you wrote in there.
Right.
That ain't what you mean the law? The law ain't nothing but some BS somebody wrote in a notebook. And when they want to justify what they do, they run to me and act like this is gravity or something. Like, man, it's gravity. Look, what are we going to do about it?
Man-made, right, man-made numbers.
Right, the law ain't nothing but the garbage somebody wrote in a notebook, bro, so that they can justify what they do. It happened to be the people in power. But yeah, abolition, man, so I don't know. And I'm being honest with you, man. There was for years, I've always sort of been the commentary, the anecdote, the critic. And I got that question for years and it would stump me. People would ask me what the solutions are. And it was kind of like, okay, Sino, you got to turn around because this conversation stops here. As time went on, I got to understanding that it's impossible for me to have a solution because I don't have the freedom to try what I want to try. See, we ask people, what are the solutions, as if I got the opportunity to go into the school system and remove that curriculum and put an Afrocentric curriculum in there, or to put a restorative justice curriculum in there, how I see fit. No, I'm telling you that's what the solution is. No, I'm telling you the solution for community policing is to pull the police out and let's start finding a way for the community to solve its own problems. No. See, we ask people what the solutions are in this country if we've had the opportunity to do anything other than what's being done or to modify it. I don't know what the solutions are because people in this country don't have the freedom to practice ideas outside of what's already economically, in the big picture, socially, and politically been put down. I don't know what it'll look like, but I do know this. I know when these people wanted to go to the moon, they marched every resource to get there with the quickness. See, we don't have solutions because as a society, we haven't been. We won't even look around the world and see where people are experimenting with ways to where the goal isn't punitive. The goal is to repair harm, to find ways to prevent harm. See, but that requires people to take, a lot of times when we ask for something, at least the powers that be know that we're asking larger conversations. See, some people to say there's something called the prison to school pipeline.
Right.
Some people bet their life that it's a connection between the public school systems and the prisons. Well, if that's so, you just can't stop at the prisons because you know there's a connection with the schools. So for me to be talking about abolishing schools, we're going to have to go in and take a look at the school systems as well, because obviously there's some connection, something wrong. There's people that will bet their lives on it, that there's a connection between people's social conditions and incarceration.
Oh, absolutely.
So you just can't abolish the prisons without taking a look at people's social conditions.
Absolutely.
See, it's larger conversations that need to be had when you say, well, what do you do? I don't know. Society doesn't know. because society hasn't got to the point to where society has said, we need to start moving in this direction. So once we at least can start saying that people are being harmed, maybe we should stop harming them. Now we got to do something different. But until we can reach that point, people don't even see there's a need, because that's what people say, well, what are we going to do with them? Maybe we wouldn't have, so we create the fuel for prisons.
Exactly.
We create it.
Exactly. We create the environments that create crime. Exactly.
You know, there's no way to separate somebody's thought from their reality, from their concrete reality. Those things go. I asked a friend of mine the other day, we have some neighborhoods in Detroit that literally look like war zones. You literally ride through parts of the east side of Detroit and the entire neighborhood, blocks are missing. It might be one house on the block and it's burnt down, caved in, and there's entire neighborhoods like this. And I asked her, but there's people growing up over there. I asked my friend, I say, what is a little kid growing up in something that looked like a war zone? What is he supposed to think? Is he not supposed to come out tough? Is he not? He probably scrapping for everything over there. Day-to-day survival is a scrap. And we live in a country that tells you that if you don't learn how to scrap the best, you ain't nothing or you ain't succeed. And most people are scrapping with the resources around them. They not scrapping with education.
That's right.
You know, they say something like, it's things like this. Somebody came in and took a look at the Detroit in general, and they said something like 48% of all fourth graders are failing in math, reading, science. So what they do is they come in Michigan in the 4th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. They give these state tests is where they kind of measure where everybody at. Well, the first time they test you in Michigan is the 4th grade. So the first time they test you, they find out 48% of the people are failing in the critical areas. I mean, that's a horrible number, but one of the things it tells me is this is the first time you test them. Mm-hmm. They probably was failing in the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. It's just the first opportunity we had to see what a horrible job you're doing. You know.
Wow.
So, but yeah.
Wow,
so it's a lot of things. Like I tell people, it's a lot of things that we hear, and it's not even based in reality, but we hear it so much. I often give people the example, fight or flight. There's nobody I know who hasn't heard of it, can't probably tell you what it is. It's taught in schools, and it's a flat out lie. There is no fight or flight. That's some garbage that somebody made up, because there's more options than running or fighting. Me and you have a conflict. Me and you don't have to fight. Me and you don't have to run. Why can't we talk?
We can.
Why can't we dialogue? So there's obviously more options than just fight or flight. But fight or flight is taught as this is the gospel. This is some scientific stuff. And I'm saying, to me, that's just a simple example, because most people have heard of it and is taught as the absolute, and it's untrue. We need to stop teaching people that your only options is to run or to fight. You're an intelligent being. You know, you can think, you can dialogue, you can sit down and create multiple options. That ain't got to be the only option. But when you hear something so much, when everything is supported by the next thing, when the media isn't challenging, the media then, for the most part, network, mainstream media then long lost the original mission of being that fifth estate.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you don't have no one that's constantly challenging or constantly presenting other information or other facts, giving people something in which they can judge their reality by, then why wouldn't you think the reality that's crafted before you is the only reality?
It's the only reality.
Exactly. I'll tell somebody, for an example, you have people that say crack cocaine in the 80s was a drug of genocidal proportion. So I say, you know what? The schools should have stopped doing everything they were doing and turned their attention to stopping the genocide. The schools should have, all that history, math, arts, they should have stopped everything. And the guy tell me the schools can't do that. I say, why can't they?
Do whatever they want to do. That's right.
Why can't the schools do that? Because that ain't what school designed for. Says who? See, a person says that because their only way of seeing school is the American model.
Based on what they've seen, exactly.
Based on what they've seen.
Exactly.
We don't even have a real people say America's the best country in the world, and we don't really know a lot about the world. And what we do know, we might not know it in the detail to where we can begin making such a statement. Like I say, there are countries that are experimenting with ways to where when a harm is caused in society, the goal is to do everything they can to repair that harm. The goal is not to punish. The goal is not to break someone's spirit.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
in a
do everything.
capitalistic society, Mr. Hamilton, the incentive is financial. And without those financial incentives, the lack of creativity is not given the opportunity to flourish, because it's all about the mighty dollar and what can be compensated or how much profit can be derived from whatever activity. And as long as people are getting paid, they will turn a blind eye. And without those resources, as is proven in your story, brother, without them having those resources to test those kits in order to examine that evidence, we don't sit here today having this conversation. And I believe, brother, what you seek, the abolition you seek, can only begin if we nurture it with conversations like this, and we have people like you to express it, to tell these stories. And that's why this conversation is so important.
And let me tell you how bad
people aren't hearing this. People are not. Let
me tell you how bad it is. So I have a woman from the Detroit Free Press call me to give comment on something that's happening in the criminal justice world. Okay. So I'm telling her, I would like you to refer to me as an abolitionist. She says she can't do it, right? So I say, well, listen, you're gonna call the detective a detective. You're gonna call the judge a judge. You're gonna call the prosecutor a prosecutor. You're gonna call the executive director this. Some of these men and women are disgraced. You're still gonna use their title of what they do. I say, I'm an abolitionist. See, it's to the point to where the word, I wasn't asking her to argue my politics. I wasn't asking her to argue any type of abolitionist values or principles. I just wanted her to refer to me as an abolitionist, because that's what I am. See, that's, if you can't even say the word abolitionist, you know, so we have a long way to go to understanding how controlled the media is, how controlled information we receive, so that we can, I don't think we have I think America has done a great job of giving the illusion of freedom. I think one of the ways they do that is they always hold up a picture of some of the worst examples of human behavior, and then say, well, y'all ain't doing that. And then we look at some of the worst examples and don't understand, kind of like how Michigan has one of the more sophisticated privatized prison systems, how America has a really sophisticated system of oppressing people in this country, you know. But yeah, abolition, as I think about it, is education. You know, people being exposed to ideas, people having the opportunity to just express themselves. You know, another thing is wrong is that the state completely takes over. Like, if me and you have a conflict, the state act like I did something to the state. Not only does the state do that, they don't say Tim Black versus Lucino Hamilton. They say the state of Michigan versus Lucino Hamilton.
Right.
I haven't done anything to the state of Michigan. Me and you may have had some type of interaction that we wish we didn't have, but the state steps in, and when the state steps in, it's to control lives, you know, and it's just a long continuation. It's a long process to get you there to begin with. But that's what I'm doing. I wrote a book since I've been home. I'm in the editing process, and it'll be out next year. In the meanwhile, and anybody out there listening, I like to work on a abolitionist workbook that maybe in the meanwhile we can go around and use it to teach about how we can end harm immediately, you know, identify harm. And that once we can identify harm, you know, the natural thing is to bring it to an end. So we just want to, so that's something I'm trying to work on and I'm gonna need help on. One of the things when I came home from prison, just to, again, I was charged with killing my mom. I didn't have any family support when I went to prison. I didn't get letters, I didn't get visits, I didn't get phone
Yes.
calls, I didn't get money. Um, and I dealt with it the best I could. I kind of suck it all in because I had a big mission to liberate myself. But having said that, a lot of the scars and wounds don't heal when you get out. 27 years of being estranged from my family was not something that I could just repair. And when I got out, it's a lot of feelings there. It's a lot of things going on. So when I got out of prison, I basically moved to a city an hour and a half away from my hometown where I didn't know anyone, and I began trying to reconstruct my life. Now, when I tell you I made every mistake there was because I didn't want to reach out. I didn't have nobody to really reach out to. I mean, most people reach out to family and friends when they come home. I didn't have family there. The majority of my friends were pen pals around the country. So I say that to say I'm probably a little bit further behind in where I would have been if I had a nephew there saying, "Oh, let me show you how to." Everything I've learned for the most part has been through trial and a lot of error.
Got it.
Just figuring things out on my own, right? So a lot of things I'm in the process of trying to do. I did manage to get the book wrote. I turned it in on time. I'm hoping they accept the version that I turned in. I would like to, like I said, I'm seriously would like to do what you do. I would like to have an opportunity to talk to people every day and have a different conversation and have the freedom to talk about a better world,
These issues. Exactly.
right? And talk about day-to-day issues.
Well,
I tell
Lucindo, the barrier of entry is very low.
yes,
That's the beauty of it. You know what I'm saying? And so you have something to talk about. You have a story to share, and you have a viewpoint that you are solidly footed in. You are standing 10 toes down, as they say. You know what I'm saying? So
yes, sir.
I know that there will be an audience for it. Um, it's up to you. And of course, if you have questions that I can answer, you can reach out and I can answer those questions. But I would say start where you are with what you have, brother.
Hey, I'm doing it on my Instagram. I try to go on there and shoot my little videos and talk
Uh-huh.
about all
Uh-huh.
type of things you can imagine. I try to post things that um people in my social surroundings may have missed. A lot of people don't get to watch the news. They out working, they out hustling. So some of those big issues, I try to make sure I can at least post it where if they didn't have a chance, I know people that tune into my page can at least see what's happening with Brittany Griner or see that the Supreme Court telling women what to do with their bodies,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, right? I have an opportunity to still post some of these things and comment on them. And yeah, man, it's a lot of work out here to be done in our society. Our world could be different. Our world could be different. And I think if people just grab a hold of that first, that everything in the world could be different and it could possibly be how we want it to be if we had the freedom to start. It's a lot of people that tell you things they know will work, but those people often or very seldom, get the opportunity on a societal level to practice ideas because they go against what you said. Most of these ideas that know that people that things make better deal with something collective or something people centered, and it go
Mm-hmm.
contrary to a capitalist system
Exactly.
that's about competition. I don't know how much time you got, but I would like to say something real quickly, right? Um, I try to express to people that the problem with capitalism is that there's nothing in the world that competitive, nothing where people don't cheat.
Mm.
It could be football, it could be spades, it could be charades. Man, quit talking. There's nothing that people do in the world where they compete. You have some things, such as sports, where they have a saying that says, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Mm.
It's that bad, right?
Right.
So having said that, it's one thing if you create something and people cheat. It's different when you create something and cheating is an element of it. That
Mm.
that there's no way to root this out ever because there's nothing competitive that also doesn't have cheating. The problem is we've made food, clothes, shelter, healthcare, basic necessities, education a competitive nature, which means for a fact that cheating is going to be an integral part of these systems. See, that's the problem. We can't get cheating out. But what does cheating look like in housing and clothing? But one thing is Detroit has those horrible, horrible numbers of 48% that's not right in reading, math, science, etc. That means that people in schools that may be teaching, you ain't got to worry about them. It gives them a competitive edge. And it gives them competitive edge because these things are systematic. I know that for a fact. When people say that anytime something reoccurs and reoccurs enough to where you can see a pattern.
Yeah, it's intentional.
See, the pattern tells you that there has to be something keeping the pattern in place or to be random. The pattern implies structural. The pattern implies systemic. So when I see numbers like that, I say, damn, somebody must not want them, and it's true.
There's nothing, Mr. Hamilton, that gets done consistently in America that's not being done without the approval of the people at top. I believe that. I say that on the show all the time. We're too, that's what being a superpower means. And until people accept that, everything that they can't stand, everything that gets them upset, everything that bothers you, everything that frustrates you, if you see that consistently, no, it's on purpose. It would not, or we would remove it because that's what being a superpower means.
Not only that,
go ahead.
I think that sometimes we forget just because something isn't benefiting you doesn't mean it's not benefiting somebody else. And that's the reason why it's probably sitting around, because it's benefiting somebody. So yeah, jails may not benefit you and your family or you and your neighborhood, but it's a lot of people whose families and communities are benefiting from it.
Brother, back to what you said when we started this conversation. You said people said, when you told them you were innocent, they said, why would they lie on you? What incentive do they have to incarcerate you? You can't be telling the truth because there's no reason for the police to make this up.
But it's a competitive nature. The whole thing is competitive. And yes, the police win when they close a case. Yes, the prosecutor wins when they get a victory. Yes, the judge campaigns on how many people they locked up and how many human years that all of them win in that system where they're cheating. See, that's what cheating looks like. Cheating looks like, well, I pulled him over because he didn't use his left turn signal. That man is cheating. That man is cheating right now. And it happens every day. It cheats by stopping frisk. They write stuff like that that's structured into the law that's cheating. No, it ain't about probable cause. It's about we can just stop anybody. They've given themselves a competitive edge. It's saying that, well, if we stop enough people, we gonna find something.
Right. To make the numbers, to increase the profits of the system.
I think that sometimes when we say the word problems, we should replace it with the word cheating. Because that's what a lot of times the problem, someone's cheating in the system. That's why we got a problem. Because someone's cheating. We got a problem with wages because someone's cheating. Someone's not giving someone enough of the share of the pie. Somebody say the workers get this much and the people up here get this much. Of course, it's a problem in there. They cheating and taking more of the pie than they deserve.
That's because the incentives are not where they should be. The incentives should be on how many children can we educate? How many people can we exonerate? How many people can we train for jobs? How many people can we improve their medical or their personal health?
You're talking about a people-centered society, not an economic-based society.
There you go, brother.
And that's what we should be fighting for, a people-centered society where policies, where programs put the people at the center as opposed to does this make dollars and cents and who does it make dollars and cents for? I wrote an article while I was in prison, and it was one of my bigger articles called The Human Cost of Incarceration. I wrote it because we often hear about the economic cost. We hear about how much money it costs to run a prison, how much money pumped into the prisons. And I think we missing, it's a human cost here. We're taking people and we're caging them. We're taking people and we're trying to strip them down of everything for whatever length of time so that they will be like any other product so that we can move them through the system. A lot of people know one of the reasons in that in that field of thought for coming into prisons and taking everything, because it becomes easier to move a couch with no legs. It becomes easier to move a couch with no pillows. You say, man, I say that ain't nothing but the frame. Man, it's easier to move it when it's been stripped down and everything's been taken away from it. And that's the goal of the prison, is control, to be able to put you in whatever particular space for however long the prison desires. And you becoming an active participant in that. That's the sick part of it. They want you to go along with what they're doing to you. And once again, only when it comes to prisoners. No, my people would encourage me to be good. Like I said, majority of my time was spent in and out of segregation or in some of the worst prisons. And I would ask you, why would you ask me to be good? Why would you ask me to go along with it? They said, well, it'll make it easier. How? Emotionally and psychologically, this doesn't never become easier. There's nothing I can do that's going to alleviate the pain and the scars that you can't see.
Right.
I still have my moments. I came out of there, like I was determined in there not to allow the prison to crush me the way I was seeing it happen and the way that I was understanding from the things I read. I was determined not to allow it to crush me. So I spent an excessive amount of time, I said, educating myself on prison. But even though I go through it, bro, I go through it. I have my moments where I cry. I have my moments where I'm super angry. I say that to say, for me to have consciously invested so much effort and time and people, resources and stuff into trying to come out of there unscathed, I still did. And a lot of people, I was an exception. And I got lucky in everything. I got lucky. Most people who write do not get the responses. I wrote 10,000 letters, 10,000 people didn't write back. You know, I got lucky to where I became the pen pal with Maya Shinwer, who was in the process of writing a book about her sister and her prison experiences, and thought, let's give Cino an opportunity to write an article. A lot of things happen by people's kindness, not because the system. And I tell people this, when I first went to prison, despite what they did to me, railroad me, all that, I still thought when I go through the Court of Appeals, they're going to let me out because this is so wrong. I still have faith in that system. I still, despite what they did to me, I never thought for a million years I'd be locked up 27 years with no evidence. It wasn't until I went in there and I really began to take a look at that system. I said, I would be foolish. And I tell people this real quick about the civil rights movement and why all those men and women who were incarcerated during that area for fighting against Jim Crow, fighting against segregation, all that stuff, that they should be released from prison, right? These were men and women who were on the right side of the law, right? Most people say that all that stuff that was happening was wrong, but nonetheless, they still incarcerated. You know, it's a lot of things that need to be. I just want to stick that in there, right? Seriously, man, I just want to stick that in there. It's men and women who are on the right side of history and they incarcerated, and people tell them that, well, they didn't do it the right way. How can somebody who don't want you to achieve what you're trying to achieve, that system creates a system for you to achieve it? It don't even make sense. And then tell them they wrong for not using the system that you said was the right way, even though you don't want them to achieve what they achieving. You don't want them to achieve. You saying segregation today, segregation forever, but you tell at the same time where they're not doing it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I appreciate you, brother, for having me on here, you know.
Wow. Mr. Hamilton, tell people how to get in contact with you for more information.
You can get in contact with me through Instagram and Facebook, the one and only Cino. You get in contact with me for speeches, for events, for programs. Somebody want to help me with this podcast, even bring me on a podcast, right?
Absolutely.
I would love to contribute, you know, in some type of quality way to making our society a more people-centered society.
Well, Mr. Hamilton, I'm damn glad that we had the opportunity to talk, brother. And I believe that anything you put your mind to, with the fire in the belly that you have, I believe you're gonna be successful. It's just as long as you stick with it. And I don't think that's something I need to tell you, of all people, about sticking with something.
Now, I
Ladies and
tell
gentlemen,
people,
yeah.
oh, sorry about that.
No, go ahead.
No, people always ask me why I never gave up. And I said, because I knew I had the truth on my side. And that's what I had. I didn't have money or a lot of other things. All I had was truth. And I just held on to it. And so it's a lot of people, man, you have your truth. And sometimes that's all you got, but that's all you need. And that's all I had. You know, so I say, hold on to your truth, man. Don't let nobody take it from you, no matter what other people say, man. Just hold on to it and keep fighting for it.
To all the brothers and sisters that are wrongfully incarcerated, and hell, even based on our shitty system, even if you're incarcerated rightly, because the ramifications, as Mr. Lucindo pointed out, that led to that are what we need to combat. My brother, thank you for your time. I feel rejuvenated just listening to you. That's one reason why I kind of just fell back, because
no, I appreciate you.
I've been going through my own shit, brother. So it's like deciding what path to take at this point, you know. But when I hear a story like yours, and the fact that I could be a conduit to help you get this story out,
thank you,
makes me feel damn proud to have a platform, brother.
Man, thank you, brother.
Because with all the shit we be talking about nowadays, hopefully anybody listens to this will contact you, and it's all worthwhile. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucindo Hamilton, a free man, not just physically, but mentally, y'all. Hit us up, TimBlackTV.com. Lucindo's information will be down in the description below. All right, brother.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you once again, brother.
Thank you.